Well, how's it going? I'm Mark Duffy. Welcome to my channel. On today's episode, I'm going to be showing you how to do long exposures with product photography and strobe lighting. I have it all set up behind me. Let's check it out. It's a floating shoe. Let's do some light trails. If you haven't guessed it already, this video is sponsored by the guys over at Spiffy Gear. They've challenged me to do this video to see can I make product photography with long exposures using their new Q6. Okay, so what are we going to be doing today? Well, first of all, we're going to be using the new Spiffy Gear Q6 for our source of the light trails for this long exposure. Secondly, we're going to be photographing this floating runner. I would go through the full details as to all the equipment that I'm using. I'm using all Godox MS300 lights, but this is not really about how to light shoes for a product photo. This is more about how to use LED lights for doing light painting in a product shoot. That there is all about trial and error. Literally just move the position of the lights until you like what you're seeing. So I can do a full auto video on how to photograph runners. For this one, it's literally how to photograph long exposures with strobe lights using some light painting. So you'll see right now how I've actually hung the runner up with the fishing line. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the Q6 to then move and give this presence and feel of movement. Now, how we achieve this is we're going to face it into the camera. Usually when I tell you for light painting, I'd never tell you to face the camera because you can see the light source. In this case, we want to see the individual LEDs because they're going to be different lines and it's going to give this really cool texture. And then if we change how we actually move it, so not just moving it straight in front of the camera, but move it towards the camera and then away to give it like a faded feel. But I can't do it when we're using all these lights. So I am going to have to turn the lights off. I do want to address one thing as well. There is a misconception that a lot of people think that by changing shutter speed, you change the actual exposure once you're using strobe lights. That's not the case. ISO and aperture change the actual exposure while using strobes. The only thing that shutter speed does is control the actual ambient lighting. And because we're in a studio here that I can control the lighting, there's no lighting here. But what I'm going to show you is I already did two photos. I did one photo at 1/200 of a second and one photo at 3 seconds, which is what we're going to be using for this long exposure. And you'll see there's absolutely no difference in the lighting at all. What you're seeing is what the actual lights captured themselves. And just while we're talking about camera settings, there is one that I find is absolutely crucial while using flash, and that is putting in the setting for rear curtain. I'll show you on the back of the Fuji, but it depends completely on your camera where it is in the menus. I can only show you what it looks like in the Fuji, but you need to switch it to rear curtain. What that means is that when you fire your exposure, your camera will start doing the long exposure, whether it's 1 second or 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever it may be. But at the very end of that exposure, then the lights will be flashed, freezing anything that's there in a second. Okay, now that we have the settings down, we're going to be using 3 seconds. On the camera, I'm going to be using f8, ISO 80, and then 3 seconds exposure. But the most important part is not the exposure itself. It could be anything. You could do 1 second, you could do 10 seconds, but it's the movement is what we want to do. So because these have all these individual LEDs, it means we're going to get this nice pattern look, and we really want to whip this. As you can see, I'm not just dragging this from left to right. I'm actually going and turning it away from the camera. And what that does as well is it actually does a fade. It does a gradient fade. So then if you do a nice, so if you can see that kind of shape there as well. So I'm turning it, and then rotating it out of the way. What that's going to do is kind of signify the path that the shoe has taken already. So it's that kind of motion blur. It's like a fake motion blur, but we're using light trails to achieve it. And if you position it right, there's no editing needed for this. Really and truly no editing in this. I'm going to try and get a couple of shots where I have to do no editing in this. I've set up the lights the way I want them. Now I just need to get the movement that I want. And then that's it, done. Post on Instagram and Facebook and wherever you want as well. Okay, now that you've seen the kind of motion we're going for, it's time to turn off the lights, start shooting the blue, and see how we get on with that. Okay, I've thought about another option as well. So Spiffy Gear have released this mount as well for the Q6, where it mounts multiple Q6s together. So you get some cool options. So usually this would be used on a camera kind of facing you. You have the three lights. You could have three of the bicolors, so really lighting you. But in this instance, we're going to use it as three separate light sources. As you can see, I'm using a blue, a red, and a yellow to get some different colors, really mix them in together. Maybe if we mix them in together, we'll get some kind of like nice patterns, maybe like a kind of purpley magenta kind of feel about it, or get the individual colors as well. It's all about playing around with it, messing around, seeing what we can get. I have no idea if this will be any good. I just figured I'd try it out because why not? So there you have it, long exposures with product photography using strobes. Really got some cool effects with the Q6, especially when I used this wee jobby here, the mount, really cool. You can see the kind of lighting that I was getting from it. Really happy with the results. Look, go out and try it out yourself. It's really easy to do. It's really fun to do. And for those of you who are on a time constraint, it is time consuming as well. You'll be at that for ages. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something from that. Don't forget to check out my Instagram and all the good things like that there. My website, markduffyphotography.com. And until the next time, later gators.